Alright, so what we're making today is beef stew, and what we first have to do is we have to take our 3.5 pound roast and actually cut it into cubes because we want to brown the meat first before putting it in our crock pot. So I basically just slice these into kind of almost like steaks, and then what you want to do is you want to cube your meat in bite-sized pieces. And they're going to shrink down a little bit more once you cook them. Don't worry about trimming any of the fat or anything because that is the flavor, and it'll help kind of season the meat throughout. So just kind of see here, they're about the size of a quarter, maybe like a gumball size. So that's what you want to do with all of your meat. And then you want to put it in some sort of pan. I prefer using a cast iron pan or a Dutch oven pan, and we're going to add probably about a tablespoon of olive oil, and just to brown up our meat. But I'll show you that as soon as you get finished cutting up the rest of your meat. Alright, now that we have our meat all cut up, what we're looking for is you want to make sure you have your oil heated up. So what you want to do is you want to hear a nice sizzle when you drop something in the pan. And that's how you know you're going to get a good sear on your meat. We're not cooking this to cook it 100%, we're just browning it. And by doing that, we're going to kind of seal the juices on the inside so that when we do add everything to the crock pot, we can go ahead and ensure that it retains its juices and then, breaks down all the muscle and the tendon in this cheaper cut of meat. So again, always want to season your meat. So it's a little salt and pepper. And then we're going to cook this. It's on medium-high heat. We're going to cook it for about maybe 5 minutes tops, and we're going to wait until we get a nice browning on all the pieces of meat. Alright, now that we're waiting for the last few minutes on our beef to sear, we're actually going to cut the onion. The best thing about doing stews is nothing has to be perfect, right? So everything can be in a rough chop. So we're just going to cut the ends of the onion, and we're going to cut it right in half. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take an onion. The flat side always goes down, so that way we're not going to try to cut an onion sideways and slip and cut ourselves. So holding it sideways, we're going to just make 3 slices into the onion. And they don't have to be perfect. Like I said, it's just a rough chop. So now we have 3 slices, well 4 altogether. Then we're going to put it back together, and we're just going to go about 5 down. Now once you get to the part towards the end, you don't want to try to finagle it because as you can see it's really moving around. What you're going to do is you're going to just flip the onion, and then you'll be able to get a better grip on it to do your last 2 slices. So I'm going to cut the rest of the 2 onions up, and then it'll just be about time for us to take our meat out of the pot. Alright, so now that our meat is out of the pan and into the crock pot, we're going to now add our onions. We've got all these great flavors in the pan, and so we don't want to waste that. So we're going to add our onions. Let those cook for a little bit, and then we're going to add our celery and our carrots. And then we'll give the pan a quick deglazing, which basically just means you cook other stuff in it. You deglaze with a liquid, meaning you're getting all the flavors and everything out of the bottom of the pan around the edges, and it'll absorb into whatever you're cooking in. Whenever you do meat, it's always good when you sear meat that you add your vegetables in and deglaze it with a liquid, whether you use a wine. We're using beef stock this time, but you could also deglaze with a little red wine as well, seeing as you're using red meat. Red meat and red wine go to good together. So again, you can kind of hear the sizzle on those onions. That's how we know we have the pan nice and hot. And now we'll work on cutting up our carrots and celery. All right, so now we're going to do our celery. One thing that I did want to point out is I just got a bunch of celery. All the outside stalks of celery is the more bitter ones, and those are the best to use for soups and stews. Once you're done with these, go ahead and add them to your onion mixture that you have cooking. All right, so we're gonna cut it in half. And what you wanna do is now, the carrot's obviously round, so it's gonna roll all over the counter. What you wanna do is just hold it and take a thin slice off the carrot, very thin. So that way we can roll it and it's not gonna go anywhere. Now you can cut it in half. And we're going to cut it about the same size as the celery, maybe a little bit smaller because these take longer to cook. And you can either cut this up or just discard it, but it's just a little, thin piece. Again, what we're cooking in the pot where the beef was with the onions and celery, we're not trying to cook these items completely. We just want to get a little sear on them, get some of those beef flavors that were on the bottom of the pan from cooking. Cook them fully because we really want them to absorb all the flavors in our stew that we're going to be putting all together in the crock pot and cooking on low for about a good 8 hours easily. So what we're going to do is add a couple and a half. You can kind of hear it sizzle. We're going to cook this for maybe another minute, no longer, and then we're going to dump this right in the crock pot as well with our beef. Alright, so now that all is mixed together in the crock pot, what I realized I forgot to do was when I was browning my meat, I forgot to add the garlic. So I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of garlic now. And because, again, this is a crock pot, it is very forgiving. All the flavors will come together nice. And then we're going to add a couple more things before we put the lid on it and let it set. All right, so the last ingredient before we add our water, we are going to put a couple potatoes in it. And it really doesn't matter what potatoes you use. You can use russet potatoes, Idaho, Yukons. I just happen to have some large red bliss potatoes. So I'm just going to grab 4 of them. If they're bigger, just use 3. And we're going to just, again, cut it down the middle. Any bad areas that you see on the potato, any brown spots, you do want to cut off and discard. But almost we're going to cut them like if you're going to cut hash browns up. So again, just a rough chop, bite-sized pieces. You don't want anything too big because a stew, you want things in bite-sized pieces. So this one needs probably 3. So go ahead and add those to your crock pot. And then we'll see how much water we need. Okay, so as I added the potato to the crock pot, I actually realized that 3 medium-sized potatoes were plenty. I don't need that 4th one, so it's going to go back in the fridge. The last 2 things that we're going to add for herbs are thyme and bay leaves. So I have fresh thyme growing in my garden. Obviously, I don't have bay leaves because they're dried. So I'm actually going to keep this whole, and I'm going to throw it right in the crock pot. All the little tendrils off of the herb will fall off. The stem will actually break down as you cook it, so no harm there. However, when you talk about bay leaves never break down, they never get soft, they kind of always stay really woody. So it's very important when you add bay leaves to a dish that number one, you count how many bay leaves you put in, so that way you know when you're serving people, if you find a bay leaf, you take it out. Don't ever serve somebody food with bay leaves in it because it could cause choking. So when you open up your thing of bay leaves, obviously mine come in a container. They get really, mangled. So I always try to find whole bay leaves, and I try to pull those ones aside. Again, bay leaves are cheap. They're like 89-99 cents for a container. So don't feel like you even have to use all the little crushed up pieces because, like I said, you don't want to get somebody to choke on those. So I'm going to put 2 bay leaves in. All the other ones are really broken up looking. Maybe I'll use this third one. So I'm going to put 3 bay leaves in. That way I know when I take my food out, I'm looking for 3 bay leaves. Again, if you're serving it to someone, just give them an FYI. Hey, if you find a bay leaf in your food, just take it out, put it to the side. But it's always better if you can catch it beforehand. And then lastly, what we're going to do is we're going to add another 2 cups of water. So I'll spin it around here. So we got our bay leaves, our thyme, all of our mixture. We'll add in 2 cups of water. And what we're looking to do is we're looking for the liquids to come right to the top of those vegetables. So from the looks of it, I need about another cup of water. And there you have it. So now we are going to add the lid. We're going to keep this on low for about 6 hours. I would check it every hour, hour and a half, and stir it. And then the last thing you can do at the end is I like to make a slurry, which thickens up the juices because we only have potatoes in here for the starch. We could have added flour when cooking the meat to kind of coat it, but I always like to add the slurry at the end so that way I can dictate how thick or how thin my stew is. And then again, some people like to have that really deep dark beef stew look, which you can do by adding some gravy master or some browning. But for right now, we're just going to keep it really simple. We're going to put this on low, and we're going to maybe stir it about every hour, hour and a half.